emergency for the first time in about...
This is Jim, and
Receiving this message. We are Ken Jennings and John Roderick. We speak to you from our present, which we can only assume is your distant past, the turbulent time that was the early 21st century.
Fearing the great cataclysm that will surely befall our civilization, we began this monumental reference of strange and obscure human knowledge. These recordings represent our attempt to compile and preserve wonders and esoterica that would otherwise be lost.
So whether you're listening from an advanced civilization or have just reinvented the technology to decrypt our transmissions, this is our legacy to you.
This is our time capsule. This is the Omnibus.
You have accessed entry 1177.JB2414, certificate number 23582. The Smiley Face Killers.
You went to college.
I believe so, yes.
But you, correct me if I'm wrong, but you have never consumed alcohol. I mean, you had a little glass of Manischewitz once at a Passover.
I'm trying to think like what all of my biggest alcohol consumption has probably been in the form of
tiramisu.
Yeah, some rum-soaked dessert or something.
But never
I feel like I was served a cocktail once on a plane accidentally, and I took a sip and I was like, "This isn't orange juice. You can't just put vodka in all the drinks." Delta.
They're like, "It's first class. What are you talking about?" As most futurelings know, I'm a recovering alcoholic, and I spent many years drinking heavily, very drunk, and did a lot of dumb things when drinking.
You don't recommend it?
No, I don't recommend drinking at all, but I don't recommend binge drinking or heavy drinking. I really don't. It's on my list of top 400 things I do not recommend.
That's a weird kind of bucket list.
Yeah.
Here's a list of things I fail to recommend to people when I ask for a recommendation.
There are a lot of things I do not recommend.
I say you should definitely watch the Ryan O'Neal, Tatum O'Neal movie Paper Moon, which is delightful.
It's a great movie, although very problematic relationship between those two.
But you do not say, I recommend binge drinking.
No, I don't recommend taking up skateboarding in your 30s. I don't recommend...
That's mostly for social reasons.
I don't recommend listening to late 90s rap rock. There are a lot of things that I would recommend you not do. Don't go into the middle of Alaska with no outdoor survival training and expect to live off the land in a school bus.
They might make a movie about you.
Yeah, it's true.
If that's the dream.
It's not so bad.
Best-selling book and movie.
Don't stake the fortunes of your company on drilling for oil in the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge.
Don't stake the fortunes of your company on a made-up blood testing device that doesn't actually work just because the CEO has a weird voice.
So you have a list of things you don't recommend.
I do.
But speaking as a former binge drinker, I can say that binge drinking produces a lot of bad results. And in my own case, a lot of injuries because you are drunk and you lose your motor control a little bit, but you also lose your judgment. You think you can do things that you can't.
Drive, chop firewood.
That's right. Climb things.
Climb the outsides of water towers.
Climb up things, climb down things. You think you can dance. You think you're funny. You think you're sexy.
Those are less likely to cause injury.
Well, I don't know.
You get
lasting
slapped
injury.
a lot.
Yeah. I mean, I knocked out 3 teeth. I broke both my hands. I spent many, many nights in emergency rooms and a smaller number, but still a significant number of nights in jails as a result of heavy drinking, out of control drinking. And I could hold my liquor. I'm a big boy. I was not given to blackouts or to passing out. I could usually drink and drink and drink and drink and stay awake and stay.
You were conscious every time you broke your hand.
Yes, I was going and going and going, and breaking my hand was just a matter of being confronted by people who wanted to teach me a lesson, and I was prepared to resist that lesson.
Those people they were bumming you out.
They were bumming me out. They were probably in a lot of cases also very drunk, and there was a lot of fighting that happened. And also just, bad accidents. Thankfully I was never somebody that drank and drove, because I couldn't afford to own a car.
That's what makes it easier to hurt someone else with your dumb accident.
Right. And there were I've met a lot of people in recovery who were not aware that they had a drinking problem because they maintained a semblance of life, right? They had a good job, they married or so forth, and they didn't, it just didn't occur to them that the fact that they would black out behind the wheel of their car, or they would lose an entire 4-day period and wake up in a motel. It's like a lot of mental illnesses. You
figure out workarounds.
Yeah.
Right?
And you kind of think that's how everybody does it, right? It's one of the things about if you drink 7 days a week, there's always somebody to drink with you. You're at the bar, you drink with somebody, then the next night there's somebody else, and the next night there's somebody else. But in your mind, you think, well, everybody is drinking every night because every night there's somebody to drink with. I definitely was surprised to learn in my early 20s that not all of my friends
were there every night.
Right? And then they were people I knew well, but then they went home and got up the next day and went to work.
As a non-drinker, I've had to confront during the pandemic just the fact that I think bars are a little odd. When I see people pining for, they're pining for the third place, the place where you can get out of the house and have and be convivial. Especially if you don't have a family at home or even a cat.
Or even if you do have a family at home.
Or in some cases, it's because you have a family at home. But I just realized I don't crave that place where the people and the noise is, because I live in the place where the people and the noise is.
Right.
But when the pandemic took that away from people, I just thought it was so odd that that's what we've chosen to base, a big part of at a certain age in your life, socialization on is special places for special kinds of grain alcohol to various percentages, right?
What's interesting is that bars and heavy drinking, the role that they've always played is in young life and in life of all ages.
It's not just young people.
Is a lowering of inhibition. Alcohol exactly is the element that makes you talk louder, lose your sense of what would have been, your sort of stifled decorum that dominates daily life. It gives you a chance to sing and to be out and
whatever the troubles that were pressing down on you earlier that day are no longer present. That's got to be nice.
Well, but the problem is, in our culture of the moment, we also reflect back on the fact that all of that lack of inhibition also eliminates a lot of the constriction that's on young men to not be violent and sexually aggressive,
harassy, yeah,
and also just entitled. A lot of the inhibitions that traditionally we couldn't wait to throw off our shoulders are actually the inhibitions that in contemporary culture we hope will keep people from
actually make a society possible.
Right. I mean, that we are animals, and some of those strictures help us, right? And alcohol works directly counter to it. And it's a big part of the conversation around alcohol, binge drinking, college students is, we hold students who are very, very drunk accountable to the same rules that we would hold them if they weren't. And alcohol subverts all of those, all of your judgment. It's just a judgment inhibitor. In removing your other inhibitions, it also removes your capacity to judge people's facial expressions, to judge how far you are from someone, to judge what time of day it is.
And not even to be aware of, that's what I always find. It's one thing that's really kept me away from alcohol. It's just that's terrifying to me that the first thing you lose is your sense of what you've lost.
Yeah, right. Right. And for me, my tendency to fight when I was drunk, it was directed entirely at other big drunk men who I thought needed to fight me right then.
It's probably best case scenario.
Yeah, and a lot of those big drunk men also wanted me to fight them. It was
perfect.
It's a classic sort of like Irish bar kind of problem of like, what did you say? How dare you besmirch the memory of Sir Walter Raleigh? Like, take it outside. I never was a bully or somebody that, and I mean, again, who knows because of how drunk I was. But typically, I think the response I got from the world was, "Boy, you sure got into a fight with the wrong Australians last night." And I was like, "Well, they were speaking Australian, and that's not."
Are there any wrong Australians to punch in a bar?
They really like to fight, and they're good at it. But our story is a story that takes place in an environment of binge drinking among young college age men,
which is kind of weirdly normalized.
It's super duper normalized, and really, this is a thing that the more privilege you have, the more binge drinking is socially acceptable. The more, I mean, it plays,
you can probably skate by.
Yeah, it plays a larger and larger role, and drinking in bars is expensive. It is and drinking in college is expensive because you are in college already. I mean, you're already living in a world of expectation and living in a world where you have a certain sense of what you're owed.
Especially, and today your expenses might be higher there than at any other time in your life.
And there are institutions in place, including your parents and your fraternity, get you out of trouble, right? And
it's also probably your first time. Like, you don't have a lot of experience navigating limits and how to avoid trouble.
And we used to celebrate this period. That's one of the things that makes this cultural moment that we're in so transformative, because it's not just reflecting on the behavior of this or that individual drunk college student, but we're really reevaluating what was decades and really hundreds of years of kind of saying, oh, these young men, aren't they sowing their wild oats, and they're
boys will be boys.
Yeah, they're out there having fun and just, learning the ropes. And
now's the time for that.
And not really ever thinking about the collateral damage that turning young men full of booze out on the world. And, and also young women as college culture got more and more integrated and more diverse, that drinking also extends to everybody now in college. And hopefully
people of both genders can punch Australians now. It's fantastic.
That's right. There are just as many rowdy Australian people basically of any gender out there ready to fight. It's one of the things that defines the Anzacs as a people. And what you get when you get young men in booze is you get a lot of accidental death, not just in car accidents, but all kinds of violence. I mean, all it takes is one wrong punch and mishap.
Falls,
like wrecks, alcohol overdose is even a thing.
Sure.
The younger brother of a good friend of mine in Alaska left a party at one point and took a shortcut home, climbing over a chain link fence. He got his pants caught on the top of the chain link fence, and he was out in somebody's backyard and nobody could hear him. And he hung there and tried to get himself loose from the fence and passed out and froze to death.
Died of exposure.
And that type of thing happens a lot. It's surprising the number of young people that just die of exposure. And not young people. This was a problem in Alaska. There actually was a city funded task force that would drive around at night and check in dumpsters.
Jeez.
Because homeless people would go into a dumpster to keep warm and either freeze to death or be killed when the garbage truck came.
Oh.
So it became a whole issue. Homelessness and freezing temperatures really don't go well.
I guess the climates where
alcohol.
The climates where people might feel the need to drink the most are the ones where are the ones where you're the least safe doing so.
In 1997, our story begins on the Upper East Side in New York. A young college student by the name of Patrick McNeil, who went to Fordham, was in an Upper East Side bar, a kind of expensive, hip, cool bar, drinking with his friends. Got real loaded. Everybody, and he was a handsome and successful, socially successful, considered a real Lothario, had a lot of girlfriends, really making it in the world. Drunk in the bar, and decided it was time to go home, stumbling, drunk, somebody was going to give him a ride. He was going to get a car back to Fordham, but it didn't come. It was 5 minutes late or whatever. And he wandered off. And,
Fordham's on the Upper East Side, right? He's probably not that far from campus.
Not far from campus. He heads off to walk. Later on, when people were interviewed there at the bar, friends and so forth, someone claimed that there was a white van parked across the street, and as Patrick, wandered up the road, the white van, started up and followed him, and Patrick stopped, briefly stopped for whatever reason, and the van stopped, and then he continued around the corner, and the van continued around the corner.
No actual malefactor should be using a white van.
A white van.
I guess in 1997, maybe we were less aware of the different vehicles.
I can say already in 1997, it was known and understood, do not get into a windowless white van, no matter how drunk you are. Although I have to say, by 97, I was sober, but in 1992, if a white van had pulled up next to me and somebody had said, "Hey, want to party?" I probably would have gotten in the van.
Is there there's no vehicle.
I got in a lot of vans.
No color or number of windows on a vehicle that would keep you from the promise of a party.
Even if a guy with a cast said, "Help me get my boat on the top of my Volkswagen Bug," I think I would have helped him. Less likely, I think.
Wait, is that a thing? Is that how you kidnap people? You pretend you have
you need a boat put on your Bug. Yeah, that's a little bit of a Ted Bundy reference.
Oh, he had a fake cast. I remember now.
That was his whole shtick. Yeah. Anyway, Patrick then goes. He disappears that night. No one can guess where he went. And the thing about Patrick is he's not. I mean, he's a well-to-do kid, or a good, like a cheeky kid, but not somebody that a van would tip. He didn't have like any criminal enterprise. He wasn't bedecked in diamonds. No real reason to target him.
Right.
But he disappeared and wasn't found for another month. And his friends and Fordham students, did an entire search of the area. They hung up signs. Have you seen him?
Where was he found? I mean, that's a hard place to go completely missing.
Well, they found him in the East River on the Brooklyn side.
Oh.
And
he got a ride from somebody.
Well, or the suspicion was, or the NYPD investigated. It was clear that his blood alcohol level was pretty high. Even after a month in the river, it was 0.16.
Does alcohol dissipate depending on how long you're in the East River? I mean, I assume we can't tell if Kennewick Man was drinking.
Yeah, there are a lot of instances in this story of people whose bodies are being forensically examined after extended periods of time in the water, and they seem to be able to tell quite a bit about your state when you died from, because it's sort of like you can tell if somebody drowned, or if they were put in the water without having drowned.
Just how much water's in their lungs.
Yeah, right? and what
did they breathe there?
Did they breathe in the water? Right. So his death is determined to be. The cause of death is undetermined, and the suspicion is that drunkenly he found his way over to the East River and fell in. He went over to the river to pee in the river or something, looking for a place to pee, and he fell in and drowned.
And currents took him to the other bank.
And then he floated down the river and drowned, right. Now, I should say that Fordham is not what a normal person would consider walking distance from 90th in the Upper East Side. Fordham is up north of the Bronx Zoo. It's about 190th.
Oh.
And it would involve...
It is further north than I thought.
It would involve walking 100 blocks. That is something that a drunk person would and could think they could do.
I'll walk back to
I'm
the
walking back.
dorms.
You can't keep me from Zaba Zaba. I've definitely walked 100 blocks in New York City. It takes quite a while.
I've done it sober, but it takes a while.
It's a full day and it's an exciting day. But you're walking in the Bronx. It's sort of a straight shot. But in order to get there, you'd have to cross the Harlem River. People who reflected back on the crime. Well, let me say that in the course of the investigation, a New York City murder detective by the name of Kevin Gannon was part of the investigative team, and he was a kind of decorated New York homicide detective. And he immediately had his suspicions about this death. And one of the things that came up was although he spent a month in the river, or his body did, Patrick's body spent a month in the river, it did not appear to have undergone decomposition. It didn't seem like a body should look after a month in the river.
So he's thinking it was somewhere else and placed in the river more recently.
That was the suspicion. And of course, the coroner declared it kind of undetermined. So it's very hard to say like how this body that seems unmolested ended up in the river. One of the things that Gannon said was to get into the East River from 90th in New York would involve crossing the FDR, which is a big, very busy highway, even in the middle of the night, pretty busy highway. And I can speak from experience as someone who has hopped the guardrail and run across the FDR in the middle of the night to get to the East River. I actually have done that, not drunk. It's a hair-raising thing, and if you were drunk, your hair would be raised. That's a real Frogger.
Maybe
moment.
you'd be more likely to try it drunk because it's such a terrible idea.
Yes, exactly. But it would also seem to be the type of thing you would do as a dare,
right?
With other friends there. Speaking for myself, it's absolutely something I would try to do. But more to the point, it's not necessarily so that he got into the river. If you accept that it was an accident, he also could have headed north, crossed the Harlem River, went down to take a pee in the Harlem River, fell in, and the Harlem River would have taken you to the East River and eventually to Brooklyn. So, but Gannon doesn't buy it. And
if your name is Gannon, you kind of have to become a cop.
I know, it's a great cop name, Gannon.
I want your badge, Gannon. My office, Gannon.
A year later, almost exactly a year later, almost exactly in the same location, another body of a young college-age guy was found there in Brooklyn in the river. But when he left his group of friends, when he drunkenly stumbled out of a bar, he was at 42nd Street in Times Square. A long way from the East River, from a long way from the Harlem River. Ended up in the same location inexplicably.
Wait, like how close? Like the same location where Patrick was found? Like,
yeah,
just within a few blocks of where his body
was found. Now Patrick disappeared in February. Larry Andrews disappeared on New Year's Eve. So both of these...
Oh, he was literally in Times Square on New Year's Eve.
Both of these... I
wonder if he was drinking.
You gotta wonder. You gotta wonder if his judgment was impaired. Both of these guys went missing in the dead of winter.
Yeah.
And this will be a reoccurring theme. And Larry Andrews also his body did not show what Gannon and other kind of investigators imagined would be the signs of decomposition that reflected the amount of time they were in the water. Now, the science of bodily decomposition in freezing water suggests that the transformation of lipids in the body that is part of decomposition, that the bacteria, the lipid transformation doesn't happen as fast, right?
Because of the cold?
The cold water actually does inhibit decomposition. And in fact, water does because, it has...
Sure, stuff's aerobic. And
it
needs... Yeah.
It's an anaerobic environment relative to pulling a body out of the water and letting it sit on the land. And a lot of times a body is preserved in the water, and as soon as you take it out, it begins immediately to decompose.
It's like you buy an avocado and a day later it's brown.
But this is one of the things that kind of is used to bolster this theory that I'm about to describe, is that the bodies seem like they've been in the water a very short amount of time relative to how long they have been. As I've kind of suggested, Patrick McNeil was the first of what became a rash of deaths where college students from privileged backgrounds who were athletic and handsome and well-dressed and popular went missing and then were discovered floating in bodies of water. Went missing in the winter, having been super duper drunk, walked out of a bar, left their friends behind, and then disappeared, only to be discovered in some cases months later, floating in lakes and rivers.
Are these all lakes? So not all in Manhattan, all in the Northeast, or?
Well, the murders in question are kind of splashed across 11 states.
Huh.
They take place from 1997 all the way to 2017. So over a 20-year period. Gannon and his New York police partner, it wasn't his partner, but became his partner in this theory, a man by the name of Anthony Duarte, started to recognize what they thought was a pattern in these young men who kind of paradoxically, we're very used to thinking now about the way murders and missing people are reported. And, a blonde girl goes missing in the Southwest, and it's all the news can talk about for 10 days. Meanwhile, indigenous women in the Southwest are, they're going missing, there
have been 30 such cases since that woman disappeared.
African-American women, like you could fill binders with the number of people that go missing and nothing is ever reported. And a lot of that is a cultural bias, presuming like, oh, well, she probably is.
That just happens a lot there.
Yeah, she ran away, or she met some guy, or she became, she disappeared, but isn't the victim of foul play.
But these are all high-profile, affluent white males.
And in a way, the suggestion of this theory is that there is a kind of corresponding bias that suggests that a certain percentage of privileged white male, handsome, successful college students are going to die every year in drunken accidents.
Liquor-related.
And that there might be, right under everyone's nose, a prolific serial killer that is targeting precisely the privileged white males that you would think were that are not victims, right? Culturally, we do not think of them in any way, shape, or form as being victims. So we're used to serial killers targeting sex workers because they have zero visibility.
Right.
But here the theory is that these young men are so visible that there couldn't possibly be a serial killer working.
It doesn't seem like, I don't associate, maybe I just need to listen to more true crime podcast. I don't associate the serial killer mentality with this kind of ingenious, devious chess game with police. I feel like that doesn't really happen, right? Usually they're just kind of grappling with their own demons, and they'll do what it takes when the madness strikes. They'll find a victim. But I mean, if true, this is seems like a pretty brilliant murder methodology.
Police love to think that they are jousting with super brainy criminals.
It flatters them, right? Then they can imagine that they're Batman or Dick Tracy and not, just
failing to catch the criminal.
Just schmoes, yeah, like constantly fighting a barrage of kind of the dumbest dregs of what civilization now offers.
What's interesting in the case of Dannon and Duarte's theory, which they called the Smiley face murders, because
why?
Because they're looking, in any case like this, you're looking for patterns to feel like if you're going to solve an actual serial killer, you're looking for patterns. This is the FBI profiling method. Like who are these killers, or who is this killer, and what's their method? What Gannon and Duarte start to pick up in investigating these murders, and they're no longer working for the NYPD. This becomes a theory that by 2008 they are operating at like free agency.
Is it a hobby, or does this pay if you can get a magazine to get on board or something?
That's maybe one of the questions. In 2000, a young guy named Brian Welzian in Chicago went drunkenly missing, and 77 days later was discovered floating in Lake Michigan outside of Gary, Indiana.
Wow.
In 2005, a man by the name of Todd Gieb was found 3 weeks after disappearing, again in Michigan. And in his case, he was found sticking up out of the water in a lake, like head and shoulders above the water, just kind of...
In a frozen lake?
All of these are happening in winter.
Yeah.
But no, just kind of like it washed ashore, but...
Just kind of bobbing
but
there?
kind of, head and shoulders above the water. In 2006, Lucas Homan left an Oktoberfest party in La Crosse, Wisconsin, and also found dead. And this was, in 2006, the 8th dead college student found in La Crosse, or missing from La Crosse, the 8th in 9 years. So La Crosse, Wisconsin quickly became kind of a focus point for this type of death.
Whoever it is, he might have started here, and I guess this does happen, right? Like sometimes undetected patterns are out there, and then the recent Golden State Killer case was someone who actually had over a dozen victims, and nobody put the pieces together because of the geographic range.
Right. Gannon and Duarte joined forces with a professor at St. Cloud State by the name of Dr. Lee Gilbertson, who is like a gang expert and a criminologist. And they devised this theory that the Smiley face murders are a concentrated effort on the part of either a killer or multiple killers. A team, a gang.
Oh, they're not just independently people who had the same idea of how to get away with murder. They might be working together. That seems unlikely. That's not a thing. To
target the best and the brightest, in Gannon's words, or the best of the best, I guess he said, as politically motivated to murder the elites.
That seems a little silly.
It strains credulity.
It doesn't seem I can't think of a serial killer with a socioeconomic agenda.
Right, but
who's making a statement with their they're grappling with compulsion. They're not, right?
So the patterns that Gannon and Duarte start to find are a lack of decomposition in bodies that have been in the water a long time. They pay for the additional tests. It's not typical in a blood test for a medical examiner to test for the date rape drug GHB, which we talked about in our Spanish Fly episode. But Gannon, suspecting its presence, tests for it and finds that GHB is present in a lot of the cadavers.
Well, that's interesting. That you would not expect that.
You would not expect it. Now, there are a couple of things, one of which is that GHB is a party drug. Okay. And so it's conceivable that it was just part of the cocktail of drugs that a young person in the mid 2000s would take as part of a party. And also, as the body is transformed after death, there's some speculation that GHB is a byproduct of the chemical processes that happen after death.
It's a party drug for bacteria too.
That's right. So no medical examiner feels like the presence of GHB is conclusive. Most of the bodies have no outward signs of violence. But the theory is that they are, because of this decomposition, because of this drug cocktail, that the young men are kidnapped and held for some period, perhaps by a Red Brigade style revolutionary group that has yet to take responsibility for these murders.
For some reason, preferring to enact their agenda in the shadows, like revolutionary groups usually do not.
Right. And then they are killed and deposited in these locations improbably sort of located downstream, caught in a fish ladder or whatever. There's a young man by the name of Tommy Booth who went missing outside of a bar, again in January. Extensive searches were performed all around the region for Tommy, and then 2 weeks later he was discovered floating in the pond immediately behind the bar.
Which presumably had been searched before?
Searched many times, according to the people there, and also found in a state of rigor mortis, which is a state that only lasts
a few days after death.
Well, not even 48 hours.
48 hours.
You're in rigor, and then you go. I guess when I say you, I mean your body goes slack again. So, but again, also this is in the dead of winter, and it's very hard to say like what's rigor mortis, what's frozen. What is it? What happens when a body falls into a pond in the dead of winter and sits there for?
This is the kind of thing that there are FBI training grounds where they just leave bodies in different kinds of soil and different kinds of sand and different kinds of bog so they can benchmark stuff, right?
They really do that. And in this case, the theory, the FBI responded to the promulgation of this theory by saying there's absolutely zero evidence that this is the work of a single person, of a combined effort. It seems to us, the FBI, whose job this is, that all of these people are just college students in their early 20s who got super drunk and fell into a frozen body of water.
But who are you going to believe? The FBI are two rogue cops with a
criminologist.
With a theory. With a conspiracy theory.
The smiley face aspect of it.
Why is it called that?
Is maybe the most interesting component, because it was one of the patterns that Gannon and Duarte detected in investigating all of these was that almost in a lot of the instances, either in the area where it is suspected the young man went into the water or very close to the area where the young man was found, there was a smiley face graffito, either on a wall or a pole or the sidewalk or a building.
Do they have anything else in common, or are they just, that seems like an extremely common thing.
Well, you're not wrong, Ken. In fact, it was determined by graffiti historians.
Finally getting their getting their time in the true crime spotlight.
And, I have several coffee table books that catalog or that document the evolution of graffiti over the years from New York City subway cars to, graffiti in Zagreb, Croatia.
That would be the last one in your alphabetical collection.
That's right. From the A train to Zagreb, because graffiti art has evolved a lot over time, and it culturally resonated around the world from Brooklyn to everywhere. But graffiti historians have determined that the smiley face is the most common graffito globally.
And it's not even by a professional artist. Often it's just going to be some yo-yo with a Sharpie, waiting outside a building or on a train or something, right? Train platform.
Yeah, and
I see it everywhere.
The criticisms of the smiley face connection are, there are a multiplicity of them, but
let me make one right now. They're also casting too wide a net by saying, if you look in bunch of different places, where the guy was last seen or where the closest place he might have got into the water or where he was found, as long as you throw a wide enough net, you can often find a smiley face.
That's a main criticism, right? Like, we don't know where the bodies went in the water.
Right.
And where they were found seemed to be not a place that the murderers would have been, because they're all floating off somewhere. So who is it that's putting these smiley faces, and how do they know? And also, when you see a montage of all the smiley faces, they are every kind of smiley face, from a Sharpie to a spray painted smiley face that's clearly been there for 25 years and none of them look the same. Everybody's got their own smiley face. Here, draw me a smiley face. Have you got a pen and paper there? Let me see your smiley face and I'll draw mine.
This is good. We don't usually do courtroom demonstrations on this show.
You know what? That's not my actual smiley face. I would do it.
I kind of do. I think Lego minifigure is mine. I'm not doing the 70s guy with the line eyes.
Okay, so I always put a nose.
Oh, I never put a nose.
Yeah, I always put a nose.
And I think a lot of people do. I think it's maybe the most common.
Oh, with the two lines for eyes.
The eyes or lines. This is your 80s Trapper Keeper smiley face.
So if you see, I think of those as a teen girl smiley face.
I do too, but that's problematic, John.
Well, I guess. But we're coming from the 80s. When was the last time I saw a teen girl draw a smiley face?
People of all genders could see the lines as vertical eyes.
There are quite a few smiley faces that have vertical eyes. There are ones with noses. There's no. You would think if this were the one way that the murderer was communicating with us,
in their dastardly, devious plan,
they would at least agree on a kind of smiley face to draw.
The Zodiac Killer just broke all these guys. They all want some puzzle to crack.
Yeah. But Gannon and Duarte have identified 13 different possible symbols. Some of the bodies appear to be placed with hands over heart, floating on their backs, although that may be what a drunk person would do if they started to, if they were like, I can't get back to shore, I'm going to float on my back with my hands on my chest.
It's also very close to just kind of shivering behavior, you know?
And, shivering to death. And some of the bodies, or quite a few, didn't drown, or they didn't have water in their lungs, but if you fell into a lake and floated downstream, you would freeze in January.
I'm no scientist, but I'm going to agree with that.
Seems like it.
I feel like the thing I would like to do here would be, kind of like how they get an actual death count in an epidemic by looking at excess deaths. Like, you want to find out, just pick some random time in the time period in the 50s and see if you can also find a bunch of bodies turning up in the same way. Because then it would just be a consequence of, as you say, young people drinking in the winter.
Yeah, I think.
Do we really have excess bodies now turning up from this secret cabal?
There is an organization in Minneapolis, Minnesota called the Center for Homicide Research. And the Center for Homicide Research has researched.
You'd assume they would.
This phenomenon.
This homicide.
They're busy researching homicides. This falls under their purview. And they have said that there is no serial killer at work here, that this is just drunk kids falling into the river. Is
there anything you can do to make the case for Gannon and Duarte? Because I'm not buying it.
What ends up happening, and Gannon and Duarte have and their partner in crime, Gilbertson, you can tell that they convince themselves, and that you're now doing the backfilling of evidence, right? That everything now seems connected.
They have the writing on this theory now. It's not that different from choosing not to get vaccinated and then loading up on reasons for months thereafter because you're dealing with the consequences.
It does seem, the thing is, you want to hesitate to say that this has become a thing that they're cynically doing for money, because they do seem really, really convinced. And what happens is they go to the families of these young boys that have, that have died in this kind of sad way and have been missing for months. And they give them this weird.
The family's going to prefer this story for sure.
Absolutely.
You're the victim here. Your kid was targeted and preyed on. He wasn't just a dope getting too drunk on a Friday night.
And although they never say, and this all, predates by a dozen years, any kind of, or more, predates by 20 years, any kind of Black Lives Matter conspiracy about the world, there's no, they've never made a connection to
an ideology,
right? A kind of like what would seem to be like a movement in the culture to eliminate drunk white college boys.
Because honestly, they've been doing a great job of eliminating themselves.
but the idea that these young men would be targeted for their privilege well predates the current conversation, because there's been. And I think it's part of the overall, since the 1960s, feeling among a lot of people in white America that it has become a crime to be a young, privileged, white, drunk college student, right? That they are a disenfranchised minority by virtue of all of the op-eds that are being written about how, or by affirmative action or whatever.
Right. It's so hard to be a white college student now.
And so this argument that, no, your kid didn't just slip when he was trying to take a pee in the Harlem River, but he was targeted by people who were against him. So a lot of the families are like, I don't think so. It just seems like he is a dumbass and he fell in the river,
The Occam's razor families.
But there are some families who have, kind of seized, and often it's a situation where, wow, he really was in the river for 3 months. He doesn't look like it.
Yeah.
He looks like he just went in the river 36 hours ago. How is that possible?
So what is it that? Is that just a case of us needing better science on these kind of cold water deaths so we can?
I mean, one of the things we don't know is what happened in that 3 months. And if a body froze and then thawed, I mean, you would find evidence in the
broken vessels. And stuff,
right. That the body would exhibit signs of having frozen. But typically, a medical examiner that pulls a 23-year-old out of the water and he has a blood alcohol level of 0.2, they're not doing super deep forensic investigations.
I read the other day that as recently as the 1950s, half of all American deaths led to autopsies. And now they're just, it was routine. And now it's, it's less than 10%. Autopsies are very rare now. Yeah. How do you,
unless somebody comes to you and says, actually, there's a serial killer at work, most medical examiners have their work cut out for them. And if somebody comes in and they
body in a river,
they were found hanging in their apartment, there's a good chance that it wasn't a secret cabal who strung them up and made it look like a suicide. In 2017, a college student by the name of Dakota fell into the river in Pittsburgh, again in January, and was not found until March, floating in the Ohio River many miles downstream. And in order to get there, he would have had to have gone not just downriver for a long way, but through a dam.
Ah.
And his body had no outward sign of physical damage. It was again sort of gave the family a sense of like, there's more to this story than meets the eye. All of this led up to a documentary, not just a film, but but a 6-part documentary series on the Oxygen Network, the famous investigative journalism of the Oxygen Network.
Well, there's a cultural moment now where we have an appetite for true crime. It has a huge audience. It has a huge female audience. You mentioned
Yes.
Oxygen.
Yes.
And we just don't have enough interesting murders to match the public appetite for non-made up murders. And I mean, at some point there's creative forces that's going to lead us to want to create them if we can.
And in an interesting flip-a-dip-a-doop-a-doo, the fact that these are all handsome, successful, white college boys makes it very interesting television. So although they're being murdered because you can murder them in plain sight, they also get better ratings than a victim of color might. Right. Young men on the Oxygen Network. So as a part of the expansion of the investigation, the sense of like, now wait a minute, is this happening nationwide? As many as 335 different deaths of college, young male college students can be connected through the smiley face and the wintertime water death to...
What a busy killer.
Well, or killers.
Or group.
What's additionally interesting is that there was a serial killer by the name of Keith Hunter Jesperson.
You don't have to use the middle name just to make him seem more like a serial killer.
The thing is,
it's Hunter too.
I wrote down Keith Jesperson, and then I was like, wait a minute, this is a serial killer. He's got to have a middle name. And I went back and I was like, oh right, Hunter. It's actually here.
I just realized I was thinking of Hunter when okay, never mind.
You're thinking of Hunter College?
I got Fordham and Hunter confused. That's what I was doing.
Right, Hunter College is right there. No,
Yeah, okay.
Fordham's all the way up by above Yankee Stadium. Keith Jesperson, from 1990 to 1995, which is right prior to the 97 death of Patrick McNeil, actually was known as the Happy Face Killer. And
that was his thing. He left a happy face at the scenes of the crime.
Yeah, and he was super mad. He is a guy that was mad that he wasn't getting credit for the murders, and so went into a public bathroom along the highway somewhere and wrote a big confession on the wall where he demonstrated, he kind of proved that he was the killer.
Inside knowledge of the crimes.
And no one reported it. It just sat there on the bathroom wall. Nobody said anything about it. Didn't gain any publicity. And so, you can imagine him waiting, for weeks. Like, when is this gonna?
It's like me after I put up my post about my kidney donation or something.
Right.
Where's my attention?
Why is this not getting faved? So then he ended up having to contact the authorities and say,
is that how he got caught?
And then eventually, I think, got caught.
Genius.
Well, I know he got caught because we know that he is.
We know
Keith Hunter Jesperson.
Ego is the great American. Hubris is the great crime, I guess, the great weakness. But I feel like serial killers of all people maybe need to be okay working in the shadows. Pick a different line of work, buddy, if you want attention.
Well, if that is your theory, then perhaps the smiley face killers are the greatest serial killers of all time, both gradually murdering the ruling class scions.
300 of them, apparently.
Whilst also leaving no trace and taking no credit, and only Gannon, Duarte, and Gilbertson are wise to their craft.
To me, now that I'm the father of a college freshman as of a couple of weeks ago, this really strikes me as a reminder of just how common it is to do something dumb and permanent, partying too hard on a Saturday night.
Yeah, especially in winter.
Save it for summer, kids.
Yeah, one lesson is, if you're super drunk and it's freezing cold, don't wander away from your friends and go try and pee in a body of water.
You should have a little slide rule at all times that computes your distance from water and the outdoor temperature,
right,
and tells you exactly how many drinks to have.
The alternative is that these are the world's greatest serial killers.
And that concludes the Smiley Face Killers, entry 1177.JB2414, certificate number 23582 in the omnibus. Now, John and I are both strikingly handsome white men, so perhaps this cabal will come after us now.
Well, we don't drink, so they're not going to be able to slip that GBH into us.
That's true. Well, they could put it into a ginger ale, I guess.
Yeah, we might not even notice that it is there because ginger ale is so delicious.
It has that great spicy fizzy flavor that you love.
I said GBH, but it's GHB, right? Yeah, it's GHB. GBH is a punk band.
GBV?
It's not GBV, although you definitely don't want to put GBV in my drink either.
Well, I mean, if there's anybody who should stay away from cold water after a show, it's the members of Guided by Voices who are, where are they from? Dayton, Ohio. Cold weather, Dayton, Ohio, and can finish off a whole cooler during a single club show.
They are super drunk, but my sense is that they don't wander off.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, they stick together.
They stick in the van.
And GBH, as far as I know...
GHB.
Well, GHB, the drug. GBH, the band, as far as I know, they tended to stick together too.
That's great.
I mean, that's the thing about being punk rock.
So
stay with your friends.
Have a buddy system.
Yeah. If you're a rich college kid, maybe your friends aren't as close as you think they are.
We in our time, we were at Omnibus Project on various social media networks. We did not have any kind of secret sign or symbol we used to signpost any kind of underground conspiracy. We were quite open about our posts.
Do you think that we should have some sort of signs? I mean, why do we not already not have some sort of Masonic symbology?
Like for listeners, like what futurelings would do when they, raise a tentacle when they meet another listener?
Yeah, I mean, Hodgman had all those hobo signs that he dined out on for a long time. Why don't we have some kind of weird, like a cross with a stag head over it, glowing with 3 rings and a...
Wait, so you just have to have that handy at any time you want to greet a fellow believer?
Well, how would we use it? I don't know. We would just put it like weird branding on all of our super good merch, like those. Like
draw a little mail truck on the wall every time you kill a hobo.
Oh, maybe that's what I'm thinking of. Yeah, I've quit killing hobos, by the way.
Sure, because Hodgman gets mad. You can. We'll leave that as an exercise to the listener. What is the best way to recognize a fellow believer in the omnibus conspiracy?
Yeah, when it meets a body coming through the rye or floating down the river.
We signed all our manifestos as at Ken Jennings or at John Roderick. Jointly, we were at Omnibus Project. Seek us out on social media or, in John's case, on Patreon. You can send us your anonymous confessions in some devious kind of ciphertext to the Omnibus Project at gmail.com. I'll spend a ton of time on that.
I know you will. I'm surprised people don't send us letters in code because you...
Oh, boy.
You would be so excited.
Like John knows, I was trying to do today's New York Times spelling bee during this show, and I found the word addict today because we were talking about alcoholism.
That's good. It's always great when minutes and minutes go by and you're not making eye contact with me because you're doing a puzzle.
No, I can do both. I found 2 8-letter words, didactic and tactical, while doing a lively podcast. That's mission accomplished.
Yeah, well done.
You could send us your, we need proof. We're not these dopes on the NYPD. We're going to actually need to see some kind of glove or toe.
Mm-hmm. Send us the toes at 55744 Shoreline, Washington.
I'd rather have a glove, but if John wants a toe, send a toe. P.O. Box 55744 Shoreline, Washington 98155. Find your fellow futurelings and decide how you would like to recognize one another with any kind of secret token or password.
Well, yeah, you need an anti-murder sign. Like if somebody grabs you off the street and is like, "I'm going to murder you," you need to be able to say like, "No," and hold up some hand signal and be like, "No."
But that only works if the attempted murderer is also a fan of the podcast.
I mean,
which I would like to hope they are not. They're listening to other weirder. They're all listening to Joe Rogan.
The murderers, you're saying?
Yeah, the murderers.
But as Omnibus becomes more and more the font of all culture, right? We're going to end up having
true.
a certain number of murderers.
Do you think a serial killer would be dissuaded in the choice of a victim if they found out they both enjoyed the same podcast or Netflix series? They might go ahead with it when the devil drives.
It's conceivable. I mean, I do feel like this is the funny thing about having a podcast that has as many listeners as we do. It's not entirely impossible that one of our listeners is already a murderer.
How many people in America are well, I mean, if we include
Murderers?
people in the criminal justice system, I mean, there's millions of Americans in the criminal justice system, mostly because they sold weed 3 times in the wrong state.
Right. But I mean, and also we don't consider people who have killed in war murderers exactly.
And I wouldn't say that, but there are 15,000 homicides in the U.S. every year,
Right.
more or less.
So, 15,000 homicides out of 350 million people.
Let's say that's 10,000 different killers a year. Let's say you're.
Oh, you think a couple of those killers are killing multiple people?
I just think it's going to be gang related, and
Yeah, you get 3 or 4 in one go.
maybe there'll be mass killings as well.
Oh, wait, no. This says I see the graph that you're looking at, but this says there were a total of 21,570 reported homicide cases in the U.S. in 2020.
Well, it went up quite a bit during COVID year.
Yeah,
I think it was pretty
obvious reasons.
Sure. How are you going to get your tensions out?
So it's not implausible, right, that someone listening to this program is like, I'm a murderer.
So 15,000. Let's say there's 15,000 new murderers every year. Let's say they've each had about 30 years to kill. Let's say they've each had about 20 years to kill somebody. So 300,000 murderers in America out of 300 million people. So roughly 1 in 1,000 people is a murderer. Well, guess what? We've got tens of thousands of listeners.
60,000 or 50, 60 murderers listening to the show right now.
Even if we have just the average number. Wait, did I just do that math right?
I'm not sure.
It depends on whether or not our listeners are more or less likely than the average American to murder someone. And I've met a few of them, and I'm going to say more.
So if you are listening to the show, and if you are a murderer, and if you're out murdering...
Stop.
Stop. But
First of all, that's a terrible lifestyle.
If you can't resist, make sure that you're not murdering futurelings by saying to your victims,
what's your favorite podcast?
Yeah, what's the difference between, or what is the connection between a mail truck and a Quonset hut? And then if they say omnibus, then you have to set them.
Can you imagine how terrifying that would be if some guy with a massive bag with eye holes over his head is like,
what's your favorite podcast?
Has you chained up in a basement, and he comes up to you and he's like, what's the connection between a mail truck and a Quonset hut? I would die of fright right there.
I'd be like, they were, one of them was a show by Ken and one of them was a show by me.
I feel like I'd try to solve the puzzle. I'd be like, oh, wait, I can figure this out. Hold on, give me a second.
They're both anagrams for a flavor of anisette.
Right. Can I have a pencil and paper? I know I'm tied up, but... so yeah, look for your fellow futurelings, not outside bars on snowy nights, but online,
Yes.
On Reddit or Discord or Facebook. And certainly, now that we're a true crime show, apparently, we're going to find a whole new set of listeners. So if you have enjoyed this entry and have not supported Omnibus at Patreon and would like to do so, you can go to patreon.com/omnibusproject and read about all the cool perks and tiers of benefits and see if any, wet your whistle. That's not the expression.
That's pretty good, though.
See if any of them
wet your whistle. Let's have that be our new phrase.
Light your firework. That's not the expression either. See if any of them tickle your fancy.
There you go. Tickle your fancy. And it turns out also, if you're wearing an Omnibus t-shirt, it may protect you from being murdered.
Sure. Or if you wear Mack Weldon underwear, it might protect you. You never know.
Oh, dear. By the time they get to your underwear, I hope you've already established that they're not going to murder you.
Yeah, they may not care about the brand at that point.
Yeah, right. Wait a minute, Mac underwear. Whoa.
But I've already cut off 2 of your fingers.
Put the lotion in the basket. Futurelings, from our vantage point in your distant past, we have no idea how long our civilization survived or whether this episode of the podcast was the final straw. And civilization begins to crumble.
Because we blew the lid off of
That's right.
the secret cabal.
That's right. They're going to
smiley faces rose up.
The smiley faces are going to step forward like watchmen.
Exactly.
We hope and pray that the catastrophe we fear may never come. But if the worst comes soon, this recording, like all our recordings, may have been our final word. But if Providence allows, we hope to be back with you soon for another entry in the Omnibus.